Fitting a bass bar into a violin top is a pretty skilled job. You're taking a straight piece of wood and fitting it into this, essentially a bowl, into a very precise location. Now, the first bass bar that I fitted in violin school took me about 4 or 5 days. You learn a lot of very useful skills, including patience and humility. But I'm going to show you a way of fitting a laminated bass bar that takes less time, requires a lot less skill, and gives equally good results. Now, before we do that, let's take a quick look at how you fit a conventional bass bar. So, fitting a bar starts with rough fitting. At this point, I'm just looking at my guidelines and looking for points of contact and removing those. That's ready to start chalk fitting. Chalk fitting involves applying chalk to the surface that you want to fit onto. Putting the bar exactly where you want it to go. I have little marks on here that tell me. Holding it in place, moving it slightly and finding out where the chalk is. And that process will be repeated and repeated and repeated. So at the moment I'm making large cuts, but as I progress, I'm going to make smaller and smaller cuts. And that will continue until you have a continuous chalk reading on the bottom of the bass bar. At which point you glue it in. You're not only trying to fit it along this surface, you need to get the angle this way, needs to be correct. And it's also possible to fit it in with a certain amount of like the bottom of a rocking chair. It can actually rock in place where you need to push and bend the top onto the bass bar. This is called springing the bar. The bar doesn't actually spring. The bar is quite tall and it will not bend in that direction, but the top will actually bend. So you're actually springing the top onto the bar. Anyway, this process, the fitting process, takes roughly an hour when you know what you're doing, and a lot longer when you don't. So that's how a conventional bass bar is fitted, and this one just needs to be glued in place. So now let's take a look at how to prepare for fitting a laminated bass bar. So you start out the same way. I have a piece of spruce with completely vertical grain this way. It's been flattened and thickness down to exactly 5.5 millimeters, which is what I normally use. And now I'm reducing the bar to strips of about 2.5 millimeters and squaring off each side, running through the bandsaw, bringing it back and squaring it off again. So here's my stock reduced to a bunch of strips. The strips still have one rough side on them, so I'm going to smooth those off and thickness them using this little thicknessing jig that I use in my plane. And this leaves the strips at exactly 2.3 millimeters. And more importantly, they're completely parallel sided, so there's no variation in the thickness, which is important because that would leave gaps in between the laminates. Here's the top, ready to take the bass bar. I've checked that I've got a very smooth, even curve running through here where the bass bar is going to go. This wouldn't necessarily work on old violins, and I really wouldn't recommend this on an antique violin where the top might be divoted and shaped in all sorts of weird ways. This is really a technique for new violins where you can control the surface that you're gluing into. So check that curve, then I glue sized and scraped it twice to make sure I have a very smooth surface, and also to ensure that when I put the hot glue on to finally glue the bass bar in place, the winter growth is not going to puff up and compromise the joint there. Now let's look at fitting the laminated bass bar. It's going to take 4 laminates, and one of them, well, 4 strips, one of them's cut in half, so actually 5 laminates. The lower 3 are very slightly bent the end upwards so that it conforms more or less with the shape of the arch on the inside. On the inside I have my guidelines where I want the bar to end up, and what I'm going to do is clamp one of the lowest laminate into place next to the guidelines. And now I have some locating blocks, some guide blocks, and I'm going to clamp into place. So there's the guide blocks. This can come off. I can stack up the laminates. And let me show you how this is looking. So it's sitting with a bit of a gap underneath there, but the slightest pressure brings it down flush with the surface. Here's the cleverest trick of all. So to glue these all up, what I'm going to do is have the laminates in their correct positions, and I'm going to squeeze them down and place the stack on a piece of blue tape. This blue tape is sticky side up, making sure they're squeezed together. Same on this end. Push it down. Now these are held in place and they're not going to slide around when I put the glue on. I'll remove the excess tape. So there's my laminate stack. Held close together, but I can splay it open to get the glue in there. And the other thing the tape does is it makes sure that I'm not gluing onto my guide blocks. So let's get some glue on it. So I've got some pretty thick glue, pretty thick hide glue here. I'm gonna put down this. This is a bit messy. I want to use plenty of glue. So getting in between the laminates, plenty of glue. There's just glue everywhere. wipe off the excess. Wipe it off the top because I don't want my clamps to stick on there forever. They're going to stick anyway, but never mind. And now let's glue the bottom. Put it in place. And I'm going to put a little glue on the inside surface. More glue on the bottom. And clamp it up. So I like to start in the middle. I'm going to check that I'm right tight against my guide blocks. And I need to clean up the squeeze out. And let's see what it looks like. So the laminates seem to have gone down pretty well. Can't see any obvious gaps. So this whole fitting and gluing operation took about 15 minutes and required a lot less skill than chalk fitting. So here's the finished bar. At a casual glance, you might not be able to tell the difference. So I think you can see that fitting a laminated bar is a fairly straightforward process. But if you're a cynic like me, you might be thinking, well, exactly how well does that bar fit? And that was a question, so I decided to look into it. And what I did, before I glued this bar into place, I actually made another one. But instead of gluing it in, I used the top as a form for the laminates. So I taped the top off and I put a piece of tape on the very bottom laminate. Then I glued it in place, and when it was set up, I was able to just lift it out. After that, I took a piece of carbon paper, laid it into the top, clamped the bar back into place again, and I was able to get a contact reading. So it's got a pretty even coverage on it. Looks very good. A little blank area here. It's a little light here, but even in the center, it's getting some reading there. A little light there, but still with some reading in there. This laminated base bar technique also allows for a couple of interesting variations. So in the demonstration, I pre-bent the longest laminates at the tips so that they would fit in with the minimum pressure. But I think it's actually not strictly necessary. The amount of pressure needed to bring the entire stack of laminates down is rather minimal. So no pre-bending is an option. How about if we went the other way and over-bent them to start with? Making sure the curve is nice and smooth. So these are quite bent, way over exaggerated, but anyway, it kind of makes the point. That's a rocking bass bar. So this can just be sprung down to the top rather than having the top spring onto the bass bar. And the final variation, I've got a strip that I gouged out, hollowed it out and filled with carbon fiber, and that would go on the lowest strip, and it would be completely hidden inside. No one would know it was there. So it makes it a little stiffer, but also a little heavier. Whether that's an advantage in any way, I don't know, but it is a possibility. The laminated bass bar, is it a good thing? Well, it's certainly quicker and easier to fit, requiring a lot less skill. You could also argue that it's stiffer because it's all long grain and none of the short grain that you get here and here with a conventional bass bar. Also, just the fact of laminating does tend to create a stiffer structure. I'm going to carry on using them until I hear of a good reason not to. And I think that you should give it a try and let me know what you think.